The title of my meditation this morning is Afraid of the Crowd. I'd like to read a verse from the book of Job, where Job is in the process of defending his own integrity. Did I fear a great multitude, or did the contempt of families terrify me that I kept silence and went not out of the door? Here we see a man defending his integrity in this 31st chapter of Job, which is a very inspiring kind of thing in the day in which we live, to see a man who had the courage of his convictions. The book runs the whole gamut of human conduct. The 31st chapter outlines some psychological and ethical concepts of a religious man. The chapter not only cites obvious transgressions that a man is involved in, transgressions that anyone can see, but the chapter deals also with the more subtle evasions and compromises which only a sensitive conscience would be aware of. The sin of staying behind doors in this chapter is placed at the very apex of man's versatility in sin. After all the varieties of sin have passed in review, the crown is given to the man behind the curtains, the one who is afraid of the crowd, the man with the blanched face, the frightened eyes peering out from behind the curtain, quiet within doors. That funereal quiet that marks the death of a soul. This is the greatest sin because it has done the most harm, and because it is the easiest to commit. Just do nothing. That's all there is to it. Just do nothing. Moral originality and courage are severely threatened by America's conforming, lockstep, regimented approach to life. Someone has put it this way: nationally, we are just folks, Kuppenheimered, movieized, Associated Pressed folks. Surely we must mourn the apathetic throng, the cowed and the meek, who see the world's great anguish and wrong and yet dare not speak. I remember a case that came into court, and I'm a court chaplain. This is my major duty in the world. A man who had beaten his wife severely was brought into court, and during the investigation, one of the police officers had gone next door because this woman was brutally beaten, and it was an aggravated assault. And so the police officer went next door and talked to the neighbor, and he said, "Didn't you hear this beating going on? Didn't you hear the screams?" And the man of the house said, "Yes, I heard all this commotion, and so I took my family to the other end of the living room, and we turned up the TV and decided we wouldn't get involved. This is not our affair." Hiding behind the curtain. Children in the city of Minneapolis are dependent and neglected, hungry and cold, and we know about it, and someone says, "Shouldn't we report it?" And someone else says, "Don't get involved, it's not our problem." We talk about world relief. Oh, that's just another gimmick. Let's take care of our own first. Those people are just foreigners. And so we turn to the local poor and we say, let's help the local poor. And church people will say, we've got agencies to do that. Don't you know? We've got a welfare department. Let them take care of those poor people. Or we talk about a church for this 20% who have not. And we say, don't be silly. They wouldn't come anyhow, and if they did have a church, they wouldn't take care of it. They'd soon wreck it. Don't get involved. Let's look for a moment at the early Christians. Suppose Jesus' disciples had been priests instead of prophets. Suppose their main interest had been the status quo. Suppose they had been mainly interested in quiet and popularity, involved only in the inoffensive carrying out of traditional routine, like the church in the 20th century. So much busy work that we don't have time for anything new. We aren't doing bad things. We are doing silly little inane things. We are drinking coffee and pink lemonade and chatting with little old ladies when the world is on fire. We have such a beautiful structure, such a beautiful program that can't be tampered with and altered so that we fail to get involved. And I hear highly placed churchmen defend this kind of thing. But look at the disciples. These were not conformists, they were rugged individualists. They had the fervor of a passionate conviction which resulted in a lot of clashes with the society of their day. If these disciples had been namby-pamby Mr. Milquetoast, how many chapters of the book of Acts do you think would have ever been written? Go through the book of Acts and see how many times the Apostle Paul was arrested, and in the street at that. What was God's man doing out in the street in the midst of some kind of turmoil and riot? Paul was not an indoor man, and that's why Christianity spread throughout the world. We just recently observed the 450th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther reacted vigorously against the clergy of his day selling indulgences for sin. That is, easy forgiveness for sin. And I am one clergyman, and I am joined by a lot of other clergymen in our day who react vigorously against a lot of pious talking clergymen who sell indulgence, who sell insulation against involvement, the kind of involvement that means bringing the gospel to bear on community and social problems. We've substituted a kind of easy involvement. We study problems. We committee problems to death. But as far as action is concerned, we find one little project, a little token project. I know of churches that have hundreds of poor families right around them, but they find one poor family and overindulge that poor family, and then hold it up as their trophy of having done something in the community. The pulpit must inform and challenge the people, not pacify people with pious pablum. A true Christian must care. He can't be apathetic and indifferent. The task of the Christian is still to turn the world upside down. That's our task. The greatest sin is cringing conformity. The sin of crowding behind secure doors in the quiet of God-denying silence. Listen to the words of a man who quit the ministry. He said, I quit because nobody cared for the inner city. Nobody cared for the Negro, the Puerto Rican, the ill-clad, the badly housed poor masses. I quit because nobody wanted vital religion. I quit because all I saw was conspicuous consumption. I quit because there was even competition among ministers for members, success orientation, and building buildings as memorials to ourselves. And he said, I couldn't stand that little group that ran everything. This minister quit the ministry because it was not the ministry to which God had called him. He didn't quit God. He said, I still believe in Jesus Christ. I still want to serve him. For it is he who taught me to care about man and God. and the deeper questions of life. But his people didn't care. They couldn't stand against the crowd. They are still peering out from behind the drawn curtains. Yet, the dynamic Christ can still make us care. He can make us care for the souls of men. He can make us care for the lives of men. For the lives of men who must live out their lives in mortal bodies that feel cold and hunger and pain, whose minds experience fear and anxiety and despair, yet men who have a capacity for triumph. I see this in my work day in and day out. Man made in the image of God, groveling at the very bottom of the barrel, his self-image destroyed, God's image destroyed, fearful of God himself and his fellow man. A man who could rise up with help, with love and affection, with guidance and support. We can do this. We can help these people. We can today be our brother's keeper if we care as much as God cared. God gave his Son. What do you get?